Okay, for those of you out in TV land, I'm going to be doing a different bunch of impressionist watercolor and acrylic, different types of strokes. You need to follow them. You first need to look at your landscape and look at the lightest color. In this landscape, it would be this yellow and white. If you're using watercolors, and I'm going to do the demo, you don't need to use any white. You can just use the plain color, which would be pure yellow, and you're just going to dilute it with water. So it's a very light yellow or a light blue. Then I'm going to also do it in acrylics. In acrylics, you have the option of adding white to the blue to make it a light blue, or white to the yellow to make it a light yellow, or you could just use the pure color diluted with water. So I'm going to show you both ways. I'm going to start with the watercolor first, okay? So for the watercolor, I'm going to use a regular Hansa yellow and a yellow ochre. And I'm only going to do that for the camera so you can be able to see it a little bit brighter where you are. I'm going to take my water, I'm going to dip it off in my rag that I have so it's not dripping. In fact, I'm going to use a larger brush for this. Okay, and I'm going to do it very lightly, okay? So now, for the students that can't see me, if you're sitting in your seat, you can come up around here because you're not going to be on camera, right? If you want to see the demo very close, you can come up here. Just stand around this line, you'll be fine. Do you see how light that is? Okay, there's no white in that with my watercolor whatsoever. If I made a mistake with my watercolor, I could take my brush, dip it in my water, wipe it off, and I could keep pulling out the color. Don't keep dipping it in the water, you see, and then moving it here, because then your paper will be too wet. So when you want to do that, you always dip your brush in the water, wipe off the brush, dabbing it like this on the rag, and pull out the color. And then keep pulling out the color and pulling out the color until you would get it light, okay? You don't have to use the white with the watercolors. If you wanted to do a darker color on top of the watercolors, let's pretend the sky is orange. You could mix yellow and red together in equal proportions, and you have a bright orange, and then you can dilute it with water, or you can take your red, a tiny bit of your red, and again, I'm picking it up, and I'm doing small amounts at this time. And do you see when I just use little amounts? It's good to do it that way, because what ends up happening is the red, you have more control over the red. And then you can go back, and if you want to make it darker, you can make it darker. And that gradation is very smooth. It doesn't, in other words, I don't have my red with a line here and then my yellow, okay? So that's one way to do it, lightly on top. And then you can control your brush, and if you wanted to put more of watercolor on top, more yellow, I can do that, and it blends perfectly. There's no brush strokes that are stopped in the middle. I've dragged all the way to the end of the paper. So I want to make sure, because it's very important when you're doing watercolors and you're doing it in a larger area, that those brush strokes are very smooth. If I make a mistake with my watercolors, I could also take my rag, making sure it's clean, and I could pull out the color too, okay? So I want to see the gradation. Do you see how smooth that is? There's nothing in between. It's very realistic and smooth. Now I'll show you something. The other way you can do it is if you work more, if you wanted thicker strokes, and you wanted to do it more impressionist, you could have the color very bright. You see how bright these strokes are compared to this? Okay, so they're very bright. And then what I could do is I'm going to pick up some orange with my brush, and I'm kind of going to go in between those strokes that I already have, and I'm just putting a little bit of orange in between these strokes. Do you see that? And now I could keep building this up. I could put another color in between there. Or what I could do is I could go back with my brush and then wet it, and I could blend these colors where they're kind of blending together, not all the way. And the harder that I push the brush, the more they would blend. And I kind of get this kind of idea going on. Right? Kind of like when we were talking last week and I was showing you the examples of the Van Gogh, and you could see all those little individual strokes. So if I was using my watercolors, what I could do is I could use my round brush, or I could use a cat tongue or a filbert, where I have a little bit of a different, more control of a line, and I could still do those lines the same way I would do if I was using acrylics. I can also make the line a little bit wider. That's why you have to decide what kind of impressionist stroke you want to follow, right? Remember when we were talking about, to remind you, Van Gogh last week, and we were looking at all those little strokes in here? This could be with watercolor. You see all these little areas? This happens to be green and orange, and I just did mine with yellow and red. So that's what you're gonna have to do. First thing is the large wash, okay? And then you're gonna have to blend those colors. So look for the lightest area in your photograph, or if you're standing outside in your landscape, right, where it goes from light to dark. So I want you to do that. Before you start, I want to do it with the acrylics, okay? Basically, today, the acrylics and the watercolor people are doing the same thing. We're just doing washes, okay? So I'm going to do it on two different canvases. Let's do this one, and I am just going, this is my acrylics now. I'm going to change my palette. And with the acrylics, I really want to make sure that my brush is saturated and that it's wet and that I wipe it off. If you don't wipe off your brush, you're going to have a problem and you're going to get bubbles in your painting. So you really do need to wipe off the brush at each time. So keep your rag near you. So I'm not going to add white to this. I'm going to have my acrylics, and they look the same. You know, these are my watercolors. These are my acrylics. And I'm going to use, for my acrylics, an ultramarine blue. And I'm going to use no white whatsoever. So this is the difference. I'm going to show you the difference between using white and not. So this is the first large wash brush, and I'm going to start, and when I put on my color, I'm not going to go like this with my brush. I'm going to go sideways for this example. And I'm just going to, maybe you're too young to remember this, but in the old days we had brooms and we kind of swept the house, right? Maybe you had a vacuum cleaner. And I want you to just sweep it very lightly. You see how I'm sweeping this very lightly? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rag, I want to show you something, and I'm going to pull it out. And when I pull it out, I get this different kind of texture. Do you see how smooth it is right away? And I get some white under there, some light color under there. It's the way I would do it very, very fast. You don't always have to do this. This is one way you might put on a color and then smooth it out very fast, okay? The other way you can do it is I'm going to use my brush again, and I'm going to go this way now, and I'm going to put on the wash, and I'm going to do it real fast so you can see the difference. And I'm going to bring the wash all the way down here. And I want to do it very lightly. So I'm putting on the wash this way, and to blend it, I'm just going back and forth. Again, this way, blend. This way, blend. So I have it like this, and that's very important because you want that to be very smooth with no lines in between. You see how that's 100% smooth and there's no lines in between? What happens is a lot of students, when they're using it and they pull it, the first mistake they make is they have too much water in their brush, right? Or they have too much paint where it becomes too dark, right? Both of them are problems. So Make sure that you're dabbing your brush off, doing it very lightly, putting it on this way, and blending it like this, going like this to the side, okay? The next thing is, say for an example, now I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm going to do another color. No, don't do it yet. Let me just show you another example, okay? So I'm going to show you what I did with the watercolors, but I'm going to do it now in acrylics. So I have my yellow, and I'm dabbing it off, and I'm going to put my yellow on now. And I'm going to use make sure your rag is clean, and I'm just smoothing it out. Okay, that's one way. I'm going to pick up the yellow again. I'm going to do it a little bit darker so you can see it, dabbing it off. And I'm going to put it on brighter. I'm going to blend it, put it on, blend it, put it on, blend it. Okay? This way you do it fast and there's no mistakes in there. Sometimes students don't stop the brush, you're going to get a line. Now, I'm going to blend another color in here. Straight color. I haven't used any white. Do you see how light that is? I'm using now my cadmium red. And I'm going to put another color in here. You see I put that color? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get this color off of the brush, or I can use a new brush. And now I'm going to blend it together. And I'm softly sweeping one color into another. Okay, and I get that. It's a beautiful gradation, and there's no lines in between. And most of you have that in your landscape if you're going from light blue to dark blue. Right, I did it in watercolors, I did it in there. Then you can start building it up more, right, if I wanted to put another color. So the wash is the most important thing. The next thing are those little strokes that we talked about. So I'm going to show you that now. So we did them in watercolor. Now we'll do them in acrylic. I'm going to put this here. Now I'm upside down. Okay.